Hey guys, this is Milo, the Pug engineer. Today, we are going to continue with the basics of Swift, and at the end of this part, we are going to build an application. So, let's start with closures. Closures are self-contained blocks of code that can be passed around and used in your code. In C or Objective-C, they are called blocks, lambdas in other languages. So let's create one. Full name format. And how do we define a closure is we put the arguments types in parentheses. So in this case, 2 strings, and the output value as in functions. And this is how we declare a closure. The closure syntax is parameters, okay, and return type here. So let's use that closure. Full name format equals first name, string, last name, string, and we are going to output a string, and we have to put the keyword in, and then close the bracket. Okay, and in here we have to put the statements, what we want that closure to do. So now it's not returning anything, so it's outputting an error, but let's return first name and the last name. And I noticed that. Okay. So we declared a closure, we added some functionality to that closure, but there are also other ways to write that over here. So Swift can infer the types of its parameters and the type of the value it returns. So you can write the same thing in a more, let's say, lean way. And you can say, for example, full name format equals first name, last name, in, and then return the same thing. So we didn't to say that the first parameter is a string, the second parameter is a string, and then it's returning a string. It's inferring all that. So this closure and this closure is exactly the same, written in a different way. And there is one more way. In Swift, you can reference the values by using $0, $1, and that's the first argument, the second argument, and so on. They called sort arguments name, and you can use them in closures. For example, the same closure could be written as full name format equals and return $0, $1. So all those closures are exactly the same. I personally do not like that one that much, but this is readable enough and lean enough, so I use that often. So let's use it. Let name equals full name format, and then pass chain do. Okay, chain do. It merged the strings as we return it here or here. Let's do another one. Var email format, and again 2 strings, and return the string. Email format equals first name, last name, in, and close a bracket, and return first name dot last name at company.com. All right. Of course, I have an error here. And now let's create a function that uses that closure. So I will create a function called merge strings, and I will have a first string, second string, and the merge operation, which in this case it will be a string, and it's outputting a string. Okay, and the function is returning a string. So that's the closure over here. Okay, and the function is returning a string. So now let's do the declaration function. Merge string equals merge operation, and let's pass the first, second, okay, and return the merged string. And we can use that function, merge strings, test me. Merge operation is full frame format, and we'll output that. Or we can say John Doe, and the merge operation will be email format. So it will output John Doe at company.com. Awesome, powerful thing, blocks. So let's do an inline closure, and you can do that, for example, writing merge strings and chain Though merge operation, we can put curly brackets here and then do, for example, use the shortcuts $0 plus, let's say, a space plus $1. And that's an inline closure. And it will do exactly the same. Also, last thing for closures is how we define a void closure. We can do that closure, and you can leave the argument names empty and then return either a void, okay, or again the same thing, it's a void, okay, and this is void closure, and call it void closure. That's it, a void closure. So that's all for closures. Let's go now to collections. I will create a new array called people names and quickly add four strings into it. Okay, you can simply reference an item in that collection by doing people names dot or square brackets and the item, for example, 1 and it's Moby. And remember, collections, they start from 0. So it's 0 is the Milo, 1 is Moby, 2 is Chain, and so on. You can also say people names dot first, it will give you the first item, or people names dot last, it will give you the last item. You can append to collections by doing people names dot append and just add another string in there. So now Steve is added to that collection, and you can see that here. You can remove an item from the collection by doing people names dot remove, and you have several options. For example, you can remove all items or remove the last item or remove an item at a specific index. For example, remove at 1. Okay, it will remove the first item. You can check if a collection is empty by doing people names is empty, and that will give us false, right? You can count by doing people names dot count. You can concatenate collections by doing, for example, people names plus, and I will add 2 more names. And be careful with this because it will not add them to the original people names collection, but it will merge 2 arrays. The first one, people names, and the second one, which is that one, and will output everything at 1. So it will concatenate the arrays. We can also insert objects at the specific index, people names dot insert, and let's add Jeff at 2. And if we check that, Jeff is as position 2. Okay. You can iterate over an entire set of values in an array using a for loop. And we can do that simply by doing for name int people names, and then let's say print name, and we'll iterate everything. If you want an index, you can do for index dot name in people names dot enumerated, and then let's print that index and then the name. Okay, this is how you enumerate collections. There is another type of collection, it's called set, which is storing distinct values of the same type with no defined order. And let's create a set now called classes, and that's a set. And we will do history, geography, and I will intentionally put 2 times geography here, and mathematics, and history again. And if I try to inspect that set, it will only contain the unique values, geography, mathematics, and history. So that's a set. And we can check if a set contains an object. So we can do if classes contains, and let's say geography, okay, print geography. You can iterate a set, but since they don't have ordering, you have the option to sort it if you want to, and you can do it with that way for single class in classes.sorted, and then print single class. Okay. The amazing thing with sets is that you can perform operations such as union, difference, subtraction, intersection. And to demonstrate that, let's create some more classes. And intentionally, I'm adding mathematics again. And now let's perform an intersection which will unite the sets with only the common values. So classes dot intersection more classes. And the only common value between this set and this set is mathematics. So it will create a new set with just mathematics in it. You can compare sets with the equal operator, but also you can use subsets. And You can use, for example, is subset to check if a set is containing specific elements. You can use is superset to determine if a set contains all the values. You can use is strict subset or superset to determine if a set is a subset or superset but not equal to a specific set. And you can use is disjoint to determine if the two sets have no common values. So let's demonstrate a few of them. So I will create a single class, and that will be a set, and it will only contain ancient history. Okay. And let's do single class is subset of more classes, and will give us true. All right. So this set is containing ancient history. All right. If we do is disjoint and more classes, it will give us false, because ancient history exists also in more classes. But if we do history, for example, it will give us true. History is not contained here. All right. That's super powerful also. And that's all about sets. Let's talk a bit about dictionaries. Let's create an empty dictionary. And you can do that by putting square brackets and then the first type, the second, and that will be a dictionary of integers and strings, and then parentheses. Okay, and that's an empty dictionary. And of course, I meant to put here equal. And now let's specify another one with values. Speed dictionary equals 80. And let's say speed limit and 299792. And that's the speed of light. Okay. And you can get the value of a dictionary by doing speed dict and give us back 80, for example. It will return the speed limit. Okay. And you can enumerate them also. So we do that for speed and speed description in speed dictionary, then print speed and dash speed description. Okay. And we'll enumerate and output everything. So speed of light and speed limit. And that's all about dictionaries. So finally, we will talk about higher order functions in Swift. With Swift, you have access to higher order functions, which you might have seen in functional programming. A few of them are map, reduce, filter, for example. Let's give an example of map first, which iterates over a collection and applies an operation to each element. Let uppercase classes equals, and there are other ways to do this, but for demonstration purposes, classes dot map, and then curly brackets, and then 0 dot uppercase. Okay, and will give us the classes we defined before, all uppercase. Or we can use the shortcuts and do, for example, classes with prefix equals classes.map and do class plus $0, and it will iterate over all elements and it will add a class in front of them. So class geography. Okay. Or another example is to perform operations. So let's create a values array with some values. Okay. And just do values.map and do, for example, float and $0 multiplied by 2.5, and will give us, all right, it's outputting a graph, but yeah, maybe I will assign that to a multiplied values. Okay, and that's map. Let's see now filter, which is iterating over a collection and returns an array containing only the elements that match. And let's create a filter classes.filter, and you can also have the option to omit the parentheses and just use the curly brackets and say 0 contains history, and then filtered classes, it will give us just the elements that contain that history. Or you can say let filtered values equals values dot filter, and then $0 modulo by 10 equals 0, and print that. And of course I have to put here filtered values, otherwise. And it will give us just the filtered elements. So let's talk now about reduce. And with reduce, you combine all the items in a collection to create a new value. So let's do a summary equals values reduce, let's say 1000 plus, and that will sum all the values in here and then add also an initial value, which is 1000. So 1088. Or let's try another example, merged classes, and let's say equals classes dot reduce and nothing up front, and then plus, and will give us a merged string. Oops. Okay, that's reduce. Finally, let's talk about flat map. And I will create an array of additional classes, which they contain two subarrays. One is here and one is here. Okay, and if I want to return just a single level array, I can do additional classes dot flat map and then just return $0 and will give me a single level array. And another example is how to get rid nulls the same way. So if you have an array, and if we inspect that array, you will see that we have the elements, but also the nil values. And we can simply do array with nulls, flat map, and 0. And flat map is deprecated, so you can use compact map in that case, which it will return print. Let's print it. It's easier to see sometimes with printing. Okay, and this is the array without any nils. Finally, a tip, you can create sequences. Let's do a sequence. And you can define, for example, in here 0 up to 50 dot map, and let's say 0, $0, and print the sequence. And it will create an array that contains a sequence of integers. All right, and that's all about higher order functions in Swift. And now it's time to build an app to see how Swift and UI elements work together. So let's create a new project in Xcode, single view application. Next, I will name the application password generator and make sure Swift is selected. And the first thing I want to do is import the assets that I will need. And the only asset I will need for this application is the background that I'm going to use in the application. And you don't need to have a background, but in this case, I will add one. So I will go first to the assets folder here, and I will right click and create a new image set. I will rename the image set to background. Okay. And we have 3 slots over here that I will need to drag the images. And this is for small resolution devices. This is for Retina devices. And this is for the larger screen Retina devices. So I will go to my Finder and I will drag the background I have created. Okay. And now to create the UI, I will go to the main.storyboard. And the storyboards are the technology Xcode uses to create UIs for mobile applications or for Mac applications. And the first thing I want to do is I will add the background I just imported, and I will need an image view for that. So I will go over here, type image view, and I will drag the image view. And then I want to make it to fit the screen. And to do that, I will resize it first until it fits. And I will also add some constraints to keep the size correct, no matter in which device I run the application. To add constraints, I will go over here to add constraints button. I will click it and I will select the 4 constraints over here, left, top, right, and bottom. And all of them are 0. So I will add those 4 constraints. And now I want to select the background image I just imported in the assets folder. And to do that, I will head to the inspector. And in the image, I will choose background. And I will also change this to aspect fill. All right, now the background has the correct size. And the next thing I want to do is I will add a button in the bottom of the page to generate the passwords. And again, I will go up here and I will type button, and I will pick up the button. I will drag it down here. I will resize it first just to the edge until it snaps to that right constraint, and to the left until it does the same. And then what I want to do is I will make this button white. So for background color, I will choose white color. And for title, generator. Okay. And I will also need some constraints to keep the button in the same place if I run the application in a different device. And I will go back to the add constraints button. Make sure left and right constraint are 16 points. The bottom constraints, I will add that to 50 points. And the height, I will make the button a little larger, so 50 again. And I will add those 4 constraints, and you can see them here. This is the bottom, this is the height constraint, this is the right, and this is the left constraint. And I would also like to change the color of the text and make it a bit larger. So let's set the color to maybe the same blue as this one. And I will change the size here to make it a bit larger, let's say 18 points. And that's the button. Also, a nice touch is to make the edges of the button rounded, and a little tip to do that quickly. Go to the identity inspector, click the plus button here, and in the key path, type corner radius, change the type to number, and set that to 5, which is the rounding, the number of points that you want to round the button. And if I run the application, you will see now that the button is rounded. Okay, you can see that over here. Back to Xcode, and now I want a text field up here to display the password. And to do that, I will go back here and type text and select the text field, drag it to the center of the screen near the top, and I will resize it again to make it fit the screen. And I will add again a few constraints. So add constraints, left and right constraints will be 16 points again. Top constraint, I will make that 60 points. And maybe I will make the height a bit larger, so 50 points also. And add 4 constraints. And here is the text field. The next step is to connect those UI elements we just created to the controller class, which in this case is the view controller over here, called viewController.Swift. And to do that, I will go to the assistant editor, and this will split the screen. And one half will be the storyboard. The second half will be the viewController class, that one. And I will select first the text field, and I will control and drag, and I will connect this outlet here and make sure connection is outlet. All right. And name, I will call this password text field and click connect. And this will create an outlet that is connected to this password text field. For the generator, we do not need to connect the outlet, but we will create an action. And what an action is when you click that button, it will trigger something. To create an action, I will do the same. Control and start dragging. And the actions are usually down here. And I will let it go and make sure connection is an action. And for name, I will choose generate button tapped, and I will click connect. And we have the action over here. So let's go back to the view controller and make sure that we see that in full screen. And here is the outlet we just connected, the password text field. And here is the action we just created, which called generate button tapped. All right. I will now create a new class to hold the logic of generating passwords. And that's a good practice, not to keep everything inside the controller, but separating your code into new reusable classes. So to do that, I will go here and select new file and Swift file next. And I will call this file generator create. Okay, and we created a new class called generator. And now it's time to write the code. So what I need to do first is declare that this is a class called generator. And then I want a function called generate. So class func generate, and I will output a string from that class. Okay. So how this generate class will work is we are going to have a pool of characters, and we are going to select some random characters from that pool, and we are going to compile a string and output that string. And to do that, to select a random character, the easiest way is to actually select a Unicode character, and we are going to pick from character 33 to character 126 from the Unicode map. And let's do that now. So let character equals parentheses 33 ... 126, and then use map and parentheses and curly brackets character and parentheses Unicode scalar $0, and I have an error here. Okay, and this will generate an array of characters starting from 36 up to 126. All right. Next, we are going to need a variable to hold the password. So var password, and it will be an array of character objects, and it will be an empty array at this point. And now let's create a loop and pick some random characters. So for underscore in 1 to, let's say, 10 characters, and I will need a guard. Let new character equals characters dot random element, else return nil, and password append new character. And finally, when we have the characters in here, we are going to return password dot map string $0, and we are going to join that. So it will generate a string out of that array of characters. Okay, that's our class to generate passwords, and this function will generate a password. We can also, to make it a bit better, let's add a size here, and that will be an integer and equals 10, and maybe we can do that to the size. The default value will be 10, so it will generate a 10 character password. Okay, that's the class. Let's now connect the class to the UI elements we created before. So let's go back to the view controller. And what we want to do now, every time we tap the generate button, this action will run, and we want to call it the generator generate. Okay, and we are going to store that to a string, call it password, and we will need to fill the password text field. To do that, we need to pass that string into the password text field. So password text field dot text equals password. Okay, so generate the password and pass that to the text field. Let's run the application now to see if that works. Okay, generator, and it's generating a string. Generator, and it's generating another. And I don't know why I call this button generator. Let's change that very quickly. So let's go back to storyboard, generate. Okay, that's much better. And since we are here, let's do one more thing. Let's add a slider to control how big the password will be. So let's go back here and type slider, drag a slider. I will put it around here. And again, I will resize it. Okay. And I will add some constraints. So I will keep that slider 35 points from the next element, which in this case is the generate button. And I will add also the side constraints. Okay. And I will also change the tint color for the slider. So to change this blue over here. So I will go to the inspector again and change the tint maybe to something like a light gray or a dark gray. Okay, and we will need to connect the slider back to the view controller. So go back to the inspector, select the slider, and I will leave it up here. I will call that length slider connect. Okay, and it created a length slider, which is a UI slider. And now we are going to get the value of that slider and pass it over to the generate function and create a password of that length. length equals length slider dot value and size and length. Okay, and we'll need to convert that to an integer, so int length. Okay, and I've forgotten to set the range of the slider, so let's quickly go back to Storyboard and select the slider, and the minimum range, it will be maybe 5 characters. The maximum will be, let's say, 50 characters. The default value will be, let's say, 10 characters. Okay, and let's run the application again. Okay, here is the slider. Let's click generate. It will generate a password of 10 characters. Let's select a different value. Generate will generate a massive password. Generate will create a different password, and you can select that password and copy it and paste it somewhere else. Okay, and that's all. I hope that you enjoyed this short introduction to Swift, and if you had, please like and subscribe to this channel. It will help a lot. See you next time.